Welcome to our Christmas special for the Nerd Card. Today, we're going to be talking about Firefly. We're also going to be giving away this book right here. This book contains pictures, set photos, behind-the-scenes stories, and scripts from the original filming of Firefly. Stay tuned, we'll tell you how you can win it. Hello and welcome to the Nerd Card. And Chuck, I gotta tell you, I'm feeling pretty goram shiny today.
That he is.
And that is because we will be covering Firefly in today's episode.
Yes, we will.
I married me a powerful, ugly creature.
How can you say that? How can you shame me in front of new people?
If I could make you prettier, I would.
You are not the man I met a year ago.
Hello and welcome. Today, as I said, we're covering Firefly.
Yeah, and I do want to mention, too, before we get started, this is per a request that we had from a subscriber.
It is, yes, our very first subscriber request.
Yep.
This is really cool to see.
And this is the first video we've made from subscriber request. We've had a few more since, but this is the first one that was requested, so there you go.
It is. I'm really excited about it. And honestly, this is something I wanted to cover anyway, and I'm very glad it got brought up because it gave me an opportunity to rewatch Firefly and Serenity. I should mention as well, we'll be covering Serenity as well in this video.
And I watched it for the first time, Firefly the show. I had seen Serenity actually before.
That's what I wanted.
You're a talker.
Was for Chuck to watch Firefly because it's such it's got such weird place in sci-fi history.
A beloved place.
It does
for the hardcore fans. Firefly has some of the most hardcore fans there are. They reminds me of Scapers. Big huge fans of Farscape, which I am.
Sure.
And Firefly fans remind me of that same kind of vibe. A show that felt like it was cut down too quickly. Farscape got more time than Firefly did.
Yes.
But it also is the same vibe, same kind of feel.
That is the biggest thing.
For the fan base is what I'm getting
That
at.
is the biggest thing about Firefly is it only went one season and then had to have a movie to kind of wrap it up. Yeah. And I think the biggest thing for me in noticing in Firefly or the biggest thing that really stands out to me is the cast of Firefly. And we have Nathan Fillion playing Malcolm Reynolds, as the captain of this Firefly vessel, the Serenity.
Yeah, transport.
Or just Serenity, not the Serenity. But we have a supporting cast.
I found Serenity.
Interesting little note here. Chuck, why don't you tell us?
Yeah, Joss Whedon wrote that song, the theme song of Firefly.
He did. And we have differing opinions on that.
I like it.
I, for one, think it's terrible, and Chuck thinks it's great. So either way, let us know what you think. We want to hear what you think of the Firefly theme because it's different, and I
actually watched the opening of every episode because I like the theme song.
I skipped it every time. So that said, it is an interesting little tidbit about it. But let's talk about the supporting cast of characters because obviously Nathan Fillion as Malcolm Reynolds is the star. He's
which is weird that you're getting used to. You think they're calling him Mel, and it's Mal.
Mal, yes. But we also have his first mate, Gina Torres, is amazing.
Yeah, she's great. She's great in everything she does.
She's so great. And
whether it's Cleopatra 2525, that's a deep cut.
Yeah, it is.
Or if it's The Matrix.
The Matrix, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, we were actually just watching The Matrix the other day, and Chuck goes, "That Gina Torres?"
Yeah, and I'd seen the movie like 10 times, and I'm like, I never really registered before.
Yes, and I mean, she's great in everything she's in. But moving on from her, Alan Tudyk.
Oh, well, of course.
Who is just amazing in absolutely everything he does.
I mean, in Rogue One.
In Rogue One, he's K2SO. He's in so many movies.
See, I love him from a movie that probably not everyone loves, but I think it's great. It's cheesy as hell. A Knight's Tale.
Oh, yes. That's one of my favorite movies,
so
actually.
Awesome in A Knight's Tale. Just pain. So much pain.
Pain.
I just... I mean, who doesn't like watching Robert Baratheon, Squire for the Joker? I mean, really.
It is.
Who doesn't?
That movie is spectacular. And Vision is their
Vision's is Chaucer. Vision's
he's Chaucer. He's Geoffrey Chaucer.
Their hype man.
It's the hype man, yeah. So that movie is awesome. I love A Knight's Tale. I think we should do an episode on A Knight's Tale.
That's a fun movie.
Awesome. All right, so we're going to do that.
We'll bring her back into Firefly.
We definitely will. So Alan Tudyk plays Wash, who is the pilot, of course. We also have Morena Baccarin, who plays
The term is companion.
Companion,
yes. That's the nice way of saying it.
Well, it's her official title, too.
Mal has a different word for
Ambassador is Mal's way of...
She's a whore, Shepard.
Yeah, he does.
He calls her that quite frequently.
Well, I mean, in the West, that's what they were called, whores. I mean, he calls her a whore.
Yeah, he calls her a whore all the time. She doesn't care for that.
It was kind of shocking to me,
either.
Honestly, the first time I saw it. That was one of my first things watching the show. So I wasn't someone who watched it as it aired. I wasn't someone who even watched it when it was really popular and before it got canceled or shortly after it got canceled. I watched it.
Neither did I.
For the first time in preparation to do this episode.
Yeah.
And it was something that I had always wanted to watch. I had always thought I should watch. But to be honest, I had watched episodes here and there disjointed and I wasn't impressed.
Yeah, well, that's just like your opinion, man.
Well, just being real, and so from that point, I didn't want to give it a chance.
We'll get into that a little bit more when we talk about why maybe Firefly failed.
Yeah.
It has a large part to do with exactly what you just described. But let's move on even more of the cast. We've got Summer Glau, who plays River. Who is my second favorite River in Sci-Fi.
Well, no one's better than River song. We love your River song. There's no one better than River song.
Yes. Her brother, the doctor, is also in that. Not that doctor. It is funny, though, that in Firefly we do have the doctor and River.
Yeah, that's true. That is very true. But not the doctor and River.
River, yes. We also have Shepard Book. Who is just a really intriguing character, in my opinion. Shepard Book comes in. He's a priest. He's a man of God, and we learn more. He
might be my favorite character on the show.
Yeah, because he's layered. There's so much of his story.
He's the most well done, I think, of all the characters.
Exactly. There's so much of his story that wasn't told, though.
Oh, for sure.
And that really bothered me, especially since when we get into Serenity, we don't get the opportunity to see more of his story.
There wasn't enough time.
There wasn't. But we should also mention Jayne.
Yep.
Is another one. And Jayne, in particular, is interesting to me because he is the only character that does not develop.
No, he's a tool in the first episode.
Let me do the math here.
He's a tool in the last episode.
At least you got some play. I missed every damn thing.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Pretty much.
He never develops. He
not
never
to say
changes.
that he's not our tool.
Right.
But he's a tool.
He is our tool. That's absolutely correct.
I always think of Jayne as Animal Mother from Full Metal Jacket. I mean, to me, that's where I first encountered that Baldwin brother.
Sure.
And that's what I always think of him in everything else. And he always plays a similar kind of role to that.
Well, he's very good at portraying that type of role.
So he's kind of typecast.
Yeah. Well, he's good at it.
If you're good at something, never do it for free.
So
sure,
that's what he's got to be. But as I said, he's really the only character that doesn't develop throughout the series.
I would agree with that.
And granted, on a shorter time frame, it's probably not going to happen anyway.
Well, no, I mean it's when you're setting up a show, the first season's always going to be a foundational season, right?
It's story building, it's world building.
Every show as you watch, if you watch The Big Bang Theory, the characters in the first season are way different than they are in the last season.
Of course.
And that's intentional. You want your character to have an arc. You want your character to grow.
Yes.
And if they're stagnant the whole time, there's no storytelling going on. And the show never got the chance to do that, right? You have one 14 episode first season.
Sure.
And then a 2-hour movie.
And that's it.
It's over. Go home.
2-hour movies doesn't tie up 15 episodes worth of foundation.
No, but they sure tried. They tried.
You know, I know we're jumping around, and I think that's okay.
Yeah, well,
it's kind of the theme of Firefly.
It really
jumping
is.
around.
We're going to get to that.
The network
in just
said
a
it was
second.
okay. But you know, for me, the movie. The first time I saw the movie, I saw it, and I'd never seen Firefly.
Sure.
I didn't even know it was from a TV show. I'll be honest. So I
would be spectacularly bored watching Serenity, not knowing.
So you know why I like
the Firefly story.
So I am a technology home theater guy, as we've talked about on our show, and at that time, high def was just coming into the home theater. Right, so HD DVD was out, and I bought an HD DVD player, and that was one of the sci-fi movies out was Serenity.
Sure.
So I wanted to watch something sci-fi like, because in home theater settings, sci-fi movies are always, show off the technology.
That they do.
So that's the first time I saw Serenity, and I liked it. I mean, it wasn't like my favorite movie ever, but I liked it.
It is a very visually beautiful movie.
By those time standard. Today, you watch it, there's no 4K release, there's no 4K transfer.
It is very different, that's for sure.
And after watching the series, I'm kind of like, this movie's not that great.
No.
I was really disappointed in the movie after watching the show because honestly, I like the show.
Yeah. It tries to cash a check that the show wrote, and it doesn't do that.
No, it's just not.
Because there's a number of storylines throughout the movie, Serenity, that are kind of mentioned throughout the series, but never really developed. And River is one of those things. River throughout the series, we don't see River's potential.
No, and I think obviously that was a foundational thread that they were setting up.
Absolutely,
and
it was.
You can see that's probably, if I'm the showrunner, I'm thinking that's a 4-season, 5-season arc.
It would have to
of
be.
what I'm setting up with there, and you'd want to continue on that story. And every season, you'd have at least an arc or two throughout the season that would have to do with River's
that progresses her story.
Yeah.
Yes,
and to try to go in part of the movie accomplish that is
it is folly.
It is.
To be,
all of a sudden she goes from helpless girl that is, messed up and trying to work through some stuff to assassin. And there's no explanation other than, they messed with her head. But you don't see that from her within the series. But in the movie, it's immediate and understood that she is an assassin. She's a badass. She can kill anybody whenever she wants and clears out a bar of people because she's triggered by some advertising.
Yeah, and she becomes this in the movie, some war machine.
I was here first.
Yeah.
Right, that you're like, what?
She's an unstoppable force.
And I remember when I watched that, when I saw Serenity, and I talked to one of my friends, and he's like, well, that's from that show Firefly. I said, no, I had no idea.
What?
And I'm like, okay. And he goes, and I talked about, Summer Glau being this, badass fighter. He goes, yeah, they didn't do that at all in the show.
Not
I'm
at
like,
all.
really?
What?
And now that I watch the show, it's like it's so out of character to see her in Serenity.
Right. I mean, you can see how they were building to it, sure.
Yeah.
But it doesn't lay those foundational pieces, which is why it's so hard to see in Serenity.
Right.
But there's a couple other things that actually don't happen in the series that are mentioned that do happen in the movie, and that's one of which is the Reavers.
Yeah.
Which should have been the big bad for the entire series. Should have been the big bad for the movie.
I'm sure that was something. It was something that they were building. That I'm sure Whedon plans were to build to this Reaver reveal in like season 3 or 4.
Right.
That you have to just throw out there in the movie, and you're kind of like, okay, so
they're like hopped up, drugged out people.
The lady from American Horror Story is telling me that That the Reavers are just colonists that were experimented on.
Yeah, and that's it. That's all it is. We find out that the Alliance actually caused the Reavers by experimenting on them.
It would have been really cool reveal in a season finale.
Yeah.
Or a penultimate episode of a season.
But not in a movie that is just tying up loose ends.
Yeah, it's just so thrown together. I mean, it was disappointing because I did like the show, and I'll be honest.
Sure.
I wish to confess. I wish to confess.
I wanted, going into it, and I hate to sound like that guy, I wanted to not like it.
I'm guilty. Guilty.
Well, and you had mentioned that before to me offline. You had mentioned that. But it really is just, there's a reason that it is the phenomenon that it is.
Yeah, and again,
it's because it is well written, it's good.
Yeah, I wanted to not like it just in a contrarian reaction subconsciously, because everybody talks all great about it. Now, I'm not a guy that I'll use the term, I'm not gonna slobber all over Firefly.
Of that I'm innocent.
But I thought it was really good. I really did like it when
it is.
At the end of the day, when the last episode of the season was over, I wanted to see another season.
Yes.
So,
and that was the big problem, is it never got that. And I think if it had, we'd be seeing, if we had done or if it had been done as like the Breaking Bad formula, and not comparing it to Breaking Bad. Breaking Bad's like the perfect series.
You're goddamn right.
But
it's the second best series, maybe.
Oh, indeed.
It's not better than The Wire.
Yeah, The Wire. Okay.
Breaking Bad is the best show I've ever seen, except maybe The Wire.
You will never stop talking about Breaking Bad or The Wire.
I will never stop talking about Breaking Bad or The Wire.
Anyway, if you were to put Firefly into a 5-season thing and just cut it off at 5 seasons, you've got the makings of a great show.
For sure.
But we only got to see one because Fox, unfortunately, didn't really believe in the show. And as a result of that, they aired them out of order.
Out of order. I show you out of order.
Well, and that's part of why I think my subconscious wanted to not like it, because when I tried to watch it before, I'd watch a couple episodes in a row and it wasn't in the intended order, and I'm like, what is this? Okay, they're doing this, then they're doing this. This makes no sense.
It's just not right.
Bunch of people tooling around in space, and it's a Western, right? Which is crazy because I love Westerns. Okay, huge fan of Tombstone.
I'm your Huckleberry.
I love Sci-Fi, obviously, and I should love Firefly, and I do like it very much.
I'm glad we've made that distinction.
It was very well done.
But
I loved
more
watching
time
that
and a better
season.
release schedule. I really feel as though this would have been 20 years ago. It would have been something was really on your radar, and you would have really loved.
Friday nights shall be reserved for watching Joss Whedon's brilliant new series, Firefly.
Does that really need to be in the agreement?
We might as well settle it now. It's going to be on for years.
And look at it this way. Would we have The Mandalorian if there was no Firefly?
No.
Because The Mandalorian is a Western in space.
It 100% is.
So
it definitely takes from that playbook. It does.
100%. I mean, if they tried to tell you, Favreau or Filoni tried to tell you that, oh, we weren't influenced by Firefly at all, I'd call bullshit.
I have spoken.
So
you are correct, sir. Yes.
So there's a big place for Firefly in the lore of sci-fi and nerd culture shows. Oh, hello again. So like we said earlier, you can win this book. And how you want to do that is below this video in the comments section. Just leave a comment about your favorite part of Firefly. You have until January 5th, at which time we will draw a winner at random. And one of you will go home with us. Merry Christmas.
Ho, ho, ho! One of the really cool aspects of Firefly that I've always loved is the scenes in space, because they are correct. Something we don't see out of sci-fi very frequently is a correct visualization and auditory sensation in space. But Firefly does that. And what they do is there is no audio in space.
Shouldn't be. There's no sound in a vacuum.
That is correct. There's no air to vibrate the molecules, so there is no sound. And in each and every scene in space in Firefly, there is no sound. And
this is how it should be.
It's really cool, and you get to see that contrast because you see, you see Serenity take off, and there's a large explosion out of the engine, and you see all of that, but you hear nothing.
Yeah.
However, when they are in an atmosphere, Serenity makes a ton of noise.
Sure.
It's a large, intimidating ship, and
it's kind of a jalopy.
It's a jalopy. Yes, that's a great way to describe it.
It's like the Millennium Falcon, but not as fast.
You've never heard of the Millennium Falcon?
Should I have?
It's a ship that made the Kessel run in less than 12 parsecs.
Right, that's exactly what it is. Well, and that speaks to the character of Malcolm Reynolds as well. He really is portrayed as a Han Solo type.
He is.
I aim to misbehave.
I mean,
I don't want to say
he's no Han Solo, but he is the Han Solo archetype. 100%. You're 100% correct.
He's that type. Yes. Yeah. And that's why, I mean, personally, that's why I loved his character in the show. And as
Han's
you
a bit more of a scoundrel, though.
Yes.
Scoundrel?
Well, as you said, early on in the show, Mal's...
Oh, I didn't like him at all.
Kind of a dick.
Yeah, he is. He's very pricky.
That guy's a dickhead.
He is, but his character grows throughout the series.
Yeah, and I think that was one of my big disappointments too. When we got to the movie, is he went right back to being no growth Mal.
Yes,
he
did,
and that was a real bummer for me. It's like, really, you're talking to these guys like this again? The relationship had changed.
It had evolved. It had
and that
grown,
was a bummer to me.
And you're right. It absolutely regressed. But that could be because of everything that he went through in the series.
It could be. I just think the movie was forced and
it was definitely forced.
Done very great.
Listen, you don't kill two of your characters if you hope to have another movie. And he did. Joss Whedon killed both Shepherd Book and Wash, the pilots in Serenity, and that sucks because it doesn't leave it open to anything more. There is no more Firefly tale to tell.
If I had to guess, and I haven't seen any interviews on it, it might be out there, but Joss Whedon probably has a bitter taste in his mouth with Firefly.
I would imagine so.
He's probably not something he would want to revisit. When studios do things
we all want to revisit it.
I understand, but when studios do things to directors like that, or show creators, and then with the final cut, I mean, you can do research on David Fincher and Alien 3.
Sure.
Alien 3 was his first feature film, and the cut that you saw in the theater is not what David Fincher was doing.
Not what he wanted, that's correct.
And if you've watched any of the Alien Quadrilogy, any of the special edition on Alien 3, you can watch the Fincher cut where they actually put in his unfinished special effects and everything to give you his movie.
That's
and
cool.
It's a far superior movie. But when they wanted him to be involved in it, he said no.
No. No.
He gave them all the materials, but he said, I want nothing to do with it. Right. He didn't even want his name on the release that they released in the theaters.
I didn't do that.
Wow.
And the studio wouldn't do it. So Whedon probably, I would guess, feels in that maybe that's why he wrote it, that those characters died, so it's just like F words, I'm done.
Well, yeah, now I can't do it anymore.
Right.
And I'm sure he was very attached to the subject matter. I mean, it was intimately, you could tell there was a lot of heart put into it.
Yeah, it feels like a show that he really cared about when you watch it. I mean, it had a real personal I don't want to say personal touch, but it felt like something that you would be personally connected to. I don't know if that makes sense.
It was a personal story.
Yeah.
It felt like something that maybe he drew from his own experiences and pulled that into it. But there's a lot of other really cool things about it, and I do want to get to this so that we get through absolutely everything. A standout guest spot on Firefly was Saffron. The character of Saffron, played by Christina Hendricks.
Oh, yeah. Right.
Is just awesome.
She's great in the show.
Her
great
character is amazing.
Yeah.
She comes in as this timid, I got married off, and she's Mal's wife, kind of. And she ends up being such a badass. And I think it's worth noting, if you're going to talk about Firefly, you have to talk about Saffron.
Well, she's like the Boba Fett companion.
Yeah, yes, that's a great way to describe it.
Yeah.
Now, we do actually encounter a bounty hunter as well in the very last episode of Firefly. It's just named as Early is his name. And it's the bounty hunter, which I thought was it could have been a really, really cool character had it not been the last episode.
Yeah.
And he's hunting River, and it could have been really cool.
Sure.
And I feel like in the movie, in Serenity, the operative was kind of that same style of character.
Yeah.
And maybe a continuation of that story without being a continuation of that story.
And again, that was a foundation piece that clearly was supposed to be more. I mean, the way the first season ends is obviously there's more story.
There's way more.
There's no continuity between that and the movie.
Sure.
You know, that's, again, part of... But as you said before, it's you kind of touched on it, but, you know, when it was released in the show, it was released... An original airing was doomed to begin with the way it was released.
It was released out of order. It wasn't treated the way it should have been.
Yeah.
Now, one other thing that I definitely want to touch on before we wrap it up here is the world building that could have been, because it was world built, and the entire story takes place 500 years in our future. It's really not that far, relatively.
Relative, if you're looking at time as a whole and dinosaurs and all that stuff, and humans been on the Earth for 2 minutes. If you look at it on a clock, that kind of time.
Dinosaurs had their shot, and nature selected them for extinction.
But
then it's 10 seconds in the future.
But I would also say, if you look at it from the viewpoint of industrial revolution and exponential growth, I mean, we went from no flight to the moon in around 100 years.
That's very true.
Deja vu.
You know, the exponential growth, you would think it may have been more, but it seems like there was almost a freeze in the show. I would imagine we would be further along.
I feel differently about that, only because it's mentioned in the show that the Alliance is where you get all the technology.
And the few times you saw Alliance planets, they were far more advanced than what we saw most of the time on the screen.
It stands to reason that the people in the Outer Rims, or whatever, maybe that's Star Wars, but whatever.
Tatooine.
If there's a bright center to the universe, you're on the planet that it's farthest from.
Yeah, Tatooine would be more rural. They'd be more kind of like the Old West, because they're just settling. They terraform these planets.
I mean, Mal would fit in Mos Eisley.
Without a doubt, he would. Yes, he would certainly fit in Mos Eisley. But I thought the other cool thing about that was the evolution of language. And it really does make sense, because a lot of the language within the series and within the movie it's a hybrid of both English and Chinese.
Yeah, that's true. Absolutely.
And
I found that's interesting, because I did notice that, and it makes a lot of sense, right? I mean, it's the largest populous country on the planet. It's China.
Right.
So it would stand to reason, if you're going in the future, that the Chinese language at some point, or Mandarin, Cantonese, you're not specific of which version it is.
Right.
Or dialect, I should say.
But it does evolve into the everyday language, which
makes sense.
Like you said, it stands to reason. We, as an English-speaking people, we incorporate words from other languages almost constantly.
English is really derived from French and German and Spanish.
Right.
So it would stand to reason that a future language would be derived from English, Spanish, and Mandarin, whatever the dominant form of Chinese dialect is.
Right.
And it would stand to reason that that could very well be the language of the future.
It could
throw
very
some
well
Russian
be.
in there, and away we go.
Sure. And I think it's a small detail, but one that's very
cool.
It's really, really cool.
It shows the depth of the show and the detail that Whedon took with designing the show.
Exactly.
And I like that. That's really cool.
He took the time to build a world that felt unique, that felt lived in, that felt...
Which is how you make great sci-fi.
Yeah, it felt genuine.
Yeah, it's how you make great shows in this genre, fantasy, sci-fi, whatever it is you build your world.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
With that, that'll be our take on Firefly. We may revisit Firefly down the road. Who knows?
I mean, there's a lot more to it, obviously, than we covered in these 25 minutes.
Right. There is a lot more to it, but this is it for now. So I'd like to remind you to like and subscribe. You can check us out on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, wherever you find your nerd news.
Out there.
We are there, plain and simple. So we'll leave you with this.
What's on your nerd card?